The rain came without warning. It always did in Lagos, not politely, not gradually, but all at once, as though the sky had simply decided it was done holding itself together. One moment the evening air was thick and golden, smelling of suya smoke and warm asphalt, and the next, the world split open and everything turned silver and loud. Jasmine Ademi pulled her jacket tighter and walked faster. She had 12 minutes before the last bus to Yaba, 40 naira left in her pocket, and a half-eaten meat pie wrapped in a paper bag that she was saving for her grandmother. The heels of her worn sneakers had started peeling 2 weeks ago. She had not yet found the time or the money to fix them. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself that a lot of things didn't matter, and most days she almost believed it. The streets outside HanSeong Global's Lagos headquarters were already electric with a different kind of energy tonight. News vans idled along the curb. A small crowd of employees had gathered beneath the glass awning, huddled together with their phones raised, their breath fogging in the cool, rain-washed air. Security personnel stood in rigid formation, earpieces gleaming, expressions trained into careful blankness. Someone had laid a red carpet inside, Jasmine assumed, because out here the rain was washing everything into a shallow brown river along the gutter. She wasn't supposed to be on this side of the building. The cafeteria staff entrance was around the back, past the loading dock, past the broken sensor light that flickered every time the wind blew. But she had taken a wrong turn somewhere in the basement corridor, and now here she was, standing on the edge of the lobby's grand glass entrance, balancing a cardboard tray of takeout coffees that were slowly going cold and starting to soak through their cups. "Move," someone muttered behind her, a security officer, young, nervous-looking. "Sorry," she stepped aside. The convoy arrived then. 3 black SUVs, so dark they seemed to drink the light around them, rolling in slow and deliberate through the rain like something out of a film. They stopped in synchronized precision. Doors opened. Umbrellas appeared. Assistants in tailored suits materialized from nowhere, moving in choreographed efficiency, and the crowd pressed forward with a murmur that started low and built quickly, like the sound of a coming wave. Jasmine stood still. She didn't mean to look. She was already turning away, already recalculating her route to the back entrance, already thinking about whether the bus had come early tonight. But something made her pause, some instinct she couldn't name, the way you sometimes pause at the edge of a room before you understand why. He stepped out of the middle vehicle. Tall, dark suit. No umbrella, he moved through the rain as though it didn't apply to him. His face was angular and composed, the kind of stillness that didn't come from peace, but from years of learning to keep everything inside. His eyes swept the crowd with the brief, measuring precision of someone who had long ago stopped seeing people and started seeing variables. And then, for just a fraction of a second, those eyes found hers. Time did something strange. It didn't stop. That was a myth. Jasmine had always thought, the idea that a single moment could suspend itself for your convenience. But it did something. It thinned. The noise fell away. The rain seemed to slow to individual drops, and for one suspended breath, she looked at him and felt the specific, disorienting vertigo of recognizing a face that your mind had filed away in a place you stopped visiting. It was him. It was the man from the road. 5 years ago. The rain, the blood on his shirt, the impossible weight of him as she struggled to keep him upright in the back of a taxi whose driver kept saying, "Ain, I said I don't want trouble," the weeks after. The quiet mornings. The smell of burnt rice and her grandmother's laughter. Him. He walked past her without slowing. Not a flicker, not a hesitation. His gaze moved through her the way light moves through glass, registered, and then gone. 2 assistants closed around him like a tide, and then he was inside, swallowed by the warmth and brightness of the building's marble atrium, and the crowd surged forward in his wake, and the moment was over. Jasmine stood in the rain. One of the coffees in her tray had finally given up. The bottom of the cup split quietly and dark liquid dripped onto her fingers, hot and then immediately cold. She didn't move. Around her, people were already turning back to their phones, already composing captions, already moving on, and she was standing perfectly still in the middle of all of it with wet shoes and a broken coffee cup and the strangest feeling, not quite pain, not quite relief, settling somewhere in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. 5 years. She exhaled. Then she walked around to the back entrance, because she was already late and being late meant a warning, and a warning meant. She stopped herself, one thing at a time. 5 years earlier, the rain had been worse. It came sideways that night, driven by a wind that smelled of the ocean and tore at plastic bags caught in gutters and made every street lamp look like a blurred bruise against the dark. Jasmine was 20 years old and finishing a double shift at the pharmacy on Bode Thomas, and she was not in the mood for complications. Her feet hurt. Her eyes hurt. Her grandmother had called twice to ask when she was coming home, and Jasmine had said soon, Mama, both times without actually knowing. She saw him when she turned the corner. He was on the ground, half against the wall of an abandoned building, his legs folded at an angle that looked accidental. White button-down shirt, expensive. She registered immediately, the kind with proper stitching soaked through with rain and something darker on his side. His face was turned away from her. A passing Okada rider slowed, looked, and kept going. 2 women on their way home crossed the street. A man in a yellow raincoat walked directly past him without looking down at all. Jasmine stopped. She stood there for 5 full seconds, which she knew because she counted them. 1, she's not a doctor. 2, she doesn't know this man. 3, he could be dangerous. 4, she has 40 naira and a bus to catch. 5, and then she crossed the street and knelt beside him in the wet gutter because what was she supposed to do exactly? Walk away. Keep counting. Hey, she touched his shoulder. He flinched, which meant he was conscious, which was something. Can you hear me? A sound, not quite a word. Okay, she looked at his side. The darkness spreading through his shirt was blood, real and slow, not catastrophic but serious enough. She pulled out her phone, called LASG emergency, held for 4 minutes. No answer, called another number. Engaged. She pressed her jacket against his side, her good jacket, the one she wore to job interviews, and she said mostly to herself, okay. Okay, okay, okay. Don't, his voice was hoarse, barely there, he tried to move. Don't move. She was already flagging down traffic, please just stay still. The taxi driver took 6 minutes of negotiation, and twice the fare she had. She paid it. She didn't know yet that this would mean eating pap without sugar for the next 4 days, that she would tell her grandmother the pharmacy gave her a food allowance, that she would spend those days quietly furious at herself for being the kind of person who couldn't just walk past things. She helped him into the back of the cab with the help of a teenager on the street who asked no questions and disappeared immediately after, and she sat beside a man she didn't know and pressed her jacket to his ribs, and told the driver to go. Go, Oya, go. And the rain hammered the roof of the taxi all the way to her apartment on the 3rd floor of a building on Masha Road, where the elevator hadn't worked since 2018. She did not yet know his name. She did not yet know that the quiet that would settle between them over the following weeks, over borrowed bowls of egusi and late nights arguing about whether rain was beautiful or just inconvenient, would be the most comfortable silence she had ever known. She did not yet know that letting him in would cost her 5 years of confusion, or that the debt would arrive not as pain, but as a man in a black suit walking past her in the rain without recognizing her face. She only knew that the elevator was broken and she had a wounded stranger and 4 flights of stairs. One thing at a time. He was heavier than he looked. That was the first thing Jasmine learned about Kang Ji-woo before she learned his name, before she learned anything at all, that the stillness of him was deceptive. Still water, deep current. She had one arm around his waist and his arm across her shoulders, and they moved up the stairwell in a slow, lurching rhythm, stopping on each landing while he breathed, and she pretended not to notice that he was gritting his teeth hard enough to make a muscle jump along his jaw. "Almost there," she said. "It was a lie. They were on the second floor." He didn't respond. "I'm Jasmine, by the way, since we're apparently doing this." She shifted his weight. "You don't have to talk, I talk when I'm nervous." A pause, then barely, "Ji-woo." "Ji-woo," she repeated it carefully, the syllables unfamiliar in her mouth. "Okay, good, that's something." They made the third-floor landing. He leaned against the wall and she let him, watching his face in the weak yellow light of the stairwell. Up close, he looked younger than she'd first thought, late 20s maybe, and there was something in his expression she couldn't name. Not just pain, something older than pain, something that had been sitting behind his eyes long before tonight. "Who did this to you?" she asked. His eyes, half closed, opened slightly. He looked at her the way people look at a question they've decided not to answer. "Okay," she said, "fourth floor." Her grandmother was awake. Of course she was. Mama Ademi had a gift, or a curse, depending on the night, for sensing when something unusual was happening within a 50-meter radius of her person. She was sitting in the plastic chair by the window with her wrapper pulled around her shoulders and her reading glasses on, even though there was nothing in her hands to read. And when Jasmine pushed the door open with her shoulder and came through it supporting a tall Korean man with blood on his shirt, Mama Ademi looked at them both for a long moment and said nothing. Then she stood up and said, "Put him on the couch." "Mama, I can explain." "Put him on the couch first, explain after." She was already moving to the kitchen. "There's hot water on the stove." Jasmine looked at Ji-woo. Ji-woo looked at the couch. He sat down with the careful, controlled movement of someone refusing to show how much it hurt, and Mama Ademi reappeared with a bowl and a cloth and pushed Jasmine gently out of the way. "Grandma, you don't have to. Go and bring the green tin under the bathroom sink." She was already pulling back his shirt, examining the wound with the calm pragmatism of a woman who had raised 3 children and buried 2 of them. "It's not as deep as it looks. He's lucky." She glanced at him. "You're lucky." Ji-woo, who had been watching her with an expression somewhere between wariness and disbelief, said quietly, "Thank you." Mama Ademi patted his hand once. "Thank God, I'm just the instrument." Jasmine stood in the bathroom doorway with the green tin and watched her grandmother work and felt something loosen in her chest, some tight, anxious thing she'd been carrying since the moment she knelt in that wet gutter. And she didn't examine it too closely because she had learned, at 16, that examining things too closely was how you found out how much they hurt. He stayed. Not because she asked him to. She hadn't. She'd assumed, the next morning, when he woke on the couch and sat up slowly and looked around her small apartment with its peeling ceiling and its window that didn't quite close and its smell of onions and shea butter, that he would leave. That he would find his phone, or his people, or whatever safety net existed for men in expensive shirts, and he would go. But he sat there for a long time very still, and when she came out of the bedroom and found him staring at the wall, she said, "Good morning," and he said, "I don't," and stopped. She waited. "I don't remember," he said. "Where I'm from, he pressed 2 fingers to his temple. His expression was controlled, but his hand wasn't quite steady. "I remember my name, I remember," another stop. "Longer this time. Fragments, but the rest is gone." He looked at her, something moved behind his eyes. "Like a word you can't find, you know it exists. You can feel the shape of it, but you can't reach it," she finished. He was quiet for a moment. "Yes." She stood there in her kitchen doorway with yesterday's clothes still on and her hair undone. And she thought about the responsible things to do, the police, a hospital, some kind of authority. And she looked at the way he was sitting with his back perfectly straight even in obvious pain. The way his hands were folded in his lap like he was working very hard to take up as little space as possible. And she thought about all the times she had sat exactly like that in rooms where she wasn't sure she was welcome. And she said, "Are you hungry?" He blinked, as though the question had caught him somewhere undefended. "I have eggs," she said, "and some bread. It's nothing special, but—" "Yes," he said quietly, "thank you." The weeks that followed had a texture Jasmine would spend years trying to describe to herself. Ordinary mostly. Surprisingly ordinary. He was quiet in a way that didn't feel like coldness, more like someone who had learned to observe first and speak only when words added something. He noticed things. He noticed when the window latch needed tightening and fixed it with a screwdriver she didn't know she had. He noticed Mama Adami's knee gave her trouble on the stairs and started quietly carrying the heavier shopping bags without being asked, without mentioning it, without making it a thing. He was terrible at cooking. This became the first real point of connection between them. The evening Jasmine came home from her shift to find the kitchen full of pale smoke and Ji-woo standing at the stove with the specific expression of a man who had made a confident decision that had gone badly wrong. "I was trying to make rice," he said. She looked at the pot. "What happened to it?" "I'm not entirely certain." She started laughing. She didn't mean to, it came out of her sudden and helpless, and she pressed her hand over her mouth. But it was too late. It was already happening. And after a moment something in his face shifted, cautious, almost puzzled, and then quietly, like something he hadn't done in a long time and wasn't sure still worked, he smiled. It changed his whole face. That was the thing about it. The careful stillness dissolved, and underneath it was something younger and unguarded, and Jasmine looked away first because she didn't know what to do with it. "Sit down," she said. "I'll cook. You can watch and learn. I feel I should warn you, I may be a slow learner." "Good thing I'm patient." She wasn't patient, actually. She was famously the opposite of patient, her grandmother said so regularly and cheerfully, and it was entirely true. But she was patient with him. She didn't know why. She told herself it was simply circumstance, proximity, the particular intimacy of sharing a small space with another person. She told herself that later, too, for a long time after. The night before he left, though she didn't know then that it was the night before, they sat on her small balcony while rain moved across the city below them. One umbrella between them, unnecessary since the balcony had a roof, but she'd opened it anyway as a joke, and he'd held it without questioning it, which somehow made her laugh again. "Do you think you'll remember?" she asked. "Eventually, all of it." He considered. Below them a bus horn, distant music, the wet earth smell of rain on hot concrete. "I think so," he said. "Parts of it are already coming back, edges of things." He paused. "I remember a building, very tall, glass and steel. I think I've been inside it many times." She nodded and didn't push. She had learned not to push. "Jasmine." He said her name the way he always said it, carefully, like he was checking that it was still the right word for her. "When I remember everything, when I find out who I am, I don't want it to mean that this," he gestured vague at the umbrella, the rain, the small balcony, all of it, "was nothing." She looked at him. It wasn't nothing. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he looked back at the rain. "No," he said quietly, "it was." She didn't know, then, what those words would cost her. She didn't know that she would replay them on difficult nights for 5 years. On the night her grandmother's breathing first started to change. On the morning she withdrew from university. On every ordinary Tuesday when ordinary loneliness arrived without announcement. She only knew the rain was beautiful that night. She had always thought it was just inconvenient. She was starting to reconsider.